Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Sim Strategy Show for Wild Card Weekend. We could do things similarly to what we've done in previous weeks, except this one's a little different because you have 2 Saturday games, 3 Sunday games. Monday, we won't tackle yet. We'll have a strategy show for Monday. We'll have live before lock, all that good stuff. But a really fun set of games coming up. My potentially record-breaking cold temperatures in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. That should be fun. And then a bunch of other games with some big spreads. 9.5 now, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. 7, it was 7.5. It's 7 now between the Cowboys and Packers. And then a couple closely contested games. Greg, I said I haven't looked at the Sims. Matter of fact, I've been a little bit under the weather. You know this. I talked to you yesterday. Took the day. I slept from 9 p.m. to 3 p.m. 9 a.m., sorry, to 3 p.m. yesterday because the day before I got no sleep. Slept in the basement because I got a newborn here, right? On the couch. Not fun. Dog's down here next to me. That's kind of neat. But I had my watch on and it tracks your sleep because I forgot. And it showed like 0 minutes of deep sleep. And it basically, and then it'll be like excellent, okay, bad, and then rest. It was just pinned to the bottom everywhere. So I went upstairs. Wife, of course, is thrilled with me that I slept the entirety of the day yesterday. Said I'll do the show today, but what I was going to say is I did the Wednesday first look show with Ben. That's when I felt it kicking in. And then yesterday I was like, all right, let me just take the day. So I haven't looked at ownership yet, but my assumption, I haven't looked at anything since we did the first. My assumption is that the Flacco, Cooper, and Njoku stacks are going to be wildly popular this weekend. What do you think?
I think that makes some sense. I do wonder how much people are going to really look into the weather and how much it's going to impact some of the ownership. To an extent, it will, just from the standpoint of, all projections are going to include the weather scenarios into the projections. So, if, it's going to be bad weather and players are going to project worse, that's certainly going to be incorporated. But yeah, I do think there's a good chance we're going to see a good amount of Browns. And then also something that I was kind of curious what your opinion is. And also, Luffy really toughing it out here because I told him he could take extra days off. Like I could do the show solo or find somebody else to do, but Luffy insisted on coming on and doing the show with me and toughing it out.
We'll make it.
Yeah. Well, what was that?
I said, we'll make it. We're good.
So appreciate for sure that you were willing to come on despite being well under the weather, just saying how shitty you were feeling. But also we have that Dolphins Chiefs game only streaming on Peacock. It's not going to be on live TV, which I think is going to be a pretty big talking point. I was curious if you had any just general thoughts on that because it's a pay-to-play NFL game to watch it.
Yeah, I think it's dumb, but I get it. I used to have cable. I've had cable forever, but I was paying like $250 a month for all the boxes and everything. And I realized like I don't even watch cable TV anymore. If anything, any like TV shows I watch are just on streaming networks. So I went to YouTube TV, still have the streaming networks. I used to have Peacock for free with the streaming networks. I don't have it now. What is it, like $4 a month? Will I get it to watch this game? Sure, probably. Why not? But I think it's kind of dumb. At the same time, though, this is the direction everything's trending. You know what bothers me more is there are a lot, I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs, right? Suburbs outside of Philadelphia. And around here, when you get into like the senior citizen age, particularly with women, don't ask me why, they love Phillies baseball, right? They love it.
Weird.
They may not necessarily understand it as well as everybody else does, but they love it. All right. Look, I'm just speaking factually here, but they love it. That's all that matters. And I always feel bad for them. So it may, ladies, gentlemen, whatever, but like there's a much older contingency of people that love Phillies baseball. Whereas like with basketball, they like it. Football, sure. But anytime you like your sports radio, it's always just a ton of people that you can tell that we're talking upwards of 70, 80 years old. They don't know how to watch these games on Amazon Plus or Facebook. Like they started doing this with Phillies. And I know there's a lot of games, don't get me wrong, but sometimes this is the little pleasure in their lives that they have left, the small hobby that remains in their otherwise boring lives. And now they can't even do that. So yeah, do I think that kind of sucks for other people more so than myself, especially older people who are far less, tech savvy? It does. But what are you going to do? This is the way things are going. And I guess I'll have Peacock by the time this game kicks off.
They paid $180 million for this one game, just for this one game, to be able to be streaming a playoff game and have it exclusively on their paid app there. So $180 million. A lot of people are thinking that it's because of the whole Taylor Swift situation, but they paid for this back in March, I think was the date. So they've known this for almost a year that this game was going to be on the paid version of the app. But just kind of curious what your thoughts were on it, especially because we don't have as many games to break down, but we'll get to it all in The Sims.
Mark Borman said, see, when my mom died, we buried her in a Cliff Lee jersey or with a Cliff Lee jersey. See what I mean?
Cliff Lee, Roy Halladay was a good rotation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good dude. They were saying there was a time where they had what? Hamels, Lee,
Halladay,
and Oswald.
Oh, that's true as well. And Roy Oswald.
Yeah. That was the four aces. And that year they did not win. The only year they won it was when it was like Hamels, and then who else did they have? Joe Blanton. I mean, there wasn't much. That was a Brad Lidge years. But anyway, happy to have you guys with us. Take one single second out of your morning to atone for your sins live from the sin bin. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 100K. It'd be greatly appreciated. I mean that. Helps us a lot. And all you guys that already support the channel, really do appreciate you. Leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after. It's going to be a long morning. Watching after the fact. And if you ever want to, all of our stuff is available in podcast form. Maybe you don't have YouTube Premium, but you want to close your phone, listen while you're driving, doing stuff around the house, whatever it may be. Shovel and snow. You know what I mean? Throw on the podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. We got you covered from top to bottom. So, yeah, man. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question. I want to ask everyone in chat a question before we get started. You know, I love this topic. I don't know why. There's just something. I love weather, right? Like I love crazy weather patterns. In another world, I would have loved to have been like a storm chaser or something like that. When the kids are grown and out of the house and where my existence no longer matters and they can survive without me, and there's enough money put aside for that not to be an issue, I'm going down south. I'm chasing storms, right? I'm chasing hurricanes, chasing tour. I'm serious too. I'm going to do it.
Do it with Mike Trout.
What's that?
Do it with Mike Trout. That's what he's really into as well.
Really?
Yeah. That's what he says. If he wasn't a baseball player, he'd be a weatherman. They've had him
dude.
like, because you know he's an Eagles fan and stuff. They've had Mike Trout on like local Eagles broadcasts to do weather reports and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Like him and Aton doing segments together.
No, I love that stuff. I dive deep into all of that for sure. Like you name it. I love it. I do. So Don't Move to Texas said, bro, if you've got multiple kids and a wife, you are a storm chaser. Yo, you're not wrong. Having the young kid being sick, it's just awful, man. But I'm not going to complain. There's people out there with way worse than I have. Anyway, here's what I wanted to say. I love crazy weather games. You guys have heard me talk about the one with, you remember Bills Patriots where they were kicking field goals pre-games and they were going backwards. The Philly Eagles and Lions game with Shady McCoy. All of that, right? Like, remember that? The snow game? Remember the snow game?
Yeah, that was a while. It was like, what, 7-8 years ago now?
Yeah. But the snow wasn't expected that day. My dad got stuck on, he was working at the hospital in Philly. He got caught on 95 for like 5 hours. Dumped 8 inches of snow in like an hour and a half. It was crazy. If you could give me one of the most memorable weather games, whether it's just bone-chilling temperatures, monsoon-like rains, wind, snow, what would it be for you guys and for you, Greg?
Monsoon, snows. So what's the, I could pick anything?
Anything. The most memorable one. Like Eli Manning, Brett Favre was another one in the frozen tundra. That was the year that the Giants won the Super Bowl.
All right. So I have one. It's not exactly weather, but do you remember the time that Jabba Chamberlain got attacked by like a swarm of bugs during a playoff game?
Yes. At Petco Park.
Yeah. Playing against Cleveland.
Yep.
I don't know. Was it?
All I know, it was in San Diego, right? It was at Petco.
Could have been. I just remember him getting attacked by bugs, and I don't know why I think about that a good amount of time.
Maybe it wasn't. I thought it was at Petco Park. I could be wrong. I
thought it was a playoff game against the then Indians, now Guardians.
Maybe. There was one at Petco too. For me, the most memorable would have been the snow game for sure. Ryan said the Tuck rule game. That's another solid one for sure. That's a good one. Giants Bills week 16, the Ahmad Bradshaw game. Ross said, yeah, there's some great ones, man. There's some good ones. Sometimes those make the most memorable games. But you know what else happens, Greg? I'll tell you what else happens. Sometimes people fade games entirely, right? Fade games entirely from a DFS perspective because of the weather, and it ends up burning the hell out of them. Now, this total has come down since Wednesday, right? But only a point. It's still sitting at 43. So if you were to really look at this, the full picture, zoom out, you're still talking about one game that has a 43-point total on this slate, and the only other game on Saturday with a 44.5-point total.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, kind of in context of this season, those aren't even that low of totals, though. You know, like we saw.
No. What I'm saying is that despite the weather, it's only a 1.5 lower than the only other game on the slate.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm also thinking from the terms of the way we saw games during the regular season, a lot of them had totals pretty regularly, especially second half of the season, sub 40 anyway. So I'm actually kind of interested because I haven't looked too much at the betting lines or anything like that we aren't seeing a bigger decrease in what the total is. I mean, I guess the offenses are pretty prolific, so that plays into it as well. But yeah, I would have expected it to be a little bit lower than that.
Yeah, don't move to Texas. Said I'm kind of upset DK doesn't have a Saturday and Sunday slate. You know, I thought they would too, honestly. I thought they would too, but I guess what's the point when you have these? What do we have, a Millie Maker on Saturday, Sunday, and they know that they're going to fill? So
yeah,
what's it matter? You know. So we got the Sims. Are we up and running? Is that the generator, or we got lineups?
I've got lineups in here and all ready to go. Jake was having some internet issues, but all good. I ran some Sims on my computer. In case people were wondering why we're kind of stalling at the top there, Jake was having some internet issues. So I logged into my account over here on a separate computer, and I ran the Sims on it so that I could screen share here while Jacob gets his internet figured out.
Yeah, strong move on the fly, brother. All right. Let's take a look. Now, Saturday first. You got Saturday pulled, right? 10,000 field of 10,000, right?
Yep.
All right. 25% to first. All right. So as I meant, can I, before we do anything, can I just see what the ownership is on Flacco compared to the other quarterbacks? I want to see what ownership looks like, because my original assumption was that the highest owned stack and quarterback was going to be Joe Flacco this week. Let me see if my suspicions are confirmed or if I'm wrong. There it is. Yep.
Yeah, so we've got basically only two quarterbacks we're getting to here. We're getting to and it's quarterbacks in one in each game. So we got Joe Flacco making up about half of our exposure, Patrick Mahomes making up about half of our exposure, and then some lineups with CJ Stroud and Tua. But yeah, we're very condensed here at quarterback, which I'm sure is going to inform what our stacks look like as far as the pass catchers as well.
I thought Flacco might even be higher owned than Patrick Mahomes. He is more owned than, but I'm saying I thought the gap could have been even more significant there. But yeah, looking at let's go back to lineups for a second, and then I just wanted to see to make sure I was, on the right path here. All right. So I guess when you look at what we already saw between CJ Stroud and Tua Tagovailoa, we're just going to have a ton of Patrick Mahomes and a ton of Joe Flacco this week, Greg. It does make sense to me, though. I mean, when it comes to Flacco, he is underpriced. You could say what you want, like, oh, he'll come back down to earth eventually. It's entirely possible that that's the case. But when you just factor in projected ownership on a stack like this, where Njoku's sub 6K, Amari Cooper sub 7K, you can't look at it and not think that they're underpriced with how well they've played. Flacco's 6,100. Quite frankly, man, the reason the ownership on him is so much higher than Tua and CJ Stroud is because really he should be the same price as those guys.
Yeah, and then the other thing too that's really important about the price tags here is there's no real value, right? There is no situation once you get into the playoffs where teams like, oh my God, we have to rest our running back because he's a little bit banged up or something like that. We've pretty much got everybody in there healthy, full go, which really creates a lack of points per dollar values on the slate. So that's where you're starting to see that this Browns team really comes into play, because while they're not value by like the traditional ways we think about value, they are relatively cheap compared to all the other teams. And you just have to save the salary somewhere. And you can't do it with any other teams. By default, you're going to be getting to the Browns.
So let's take a look at some of the top simmed ROI lineups. So for those of you guys wondering, if you're new to the show, if you're not new to the show, forgive me as I take 30 seconds to explain this. Contest generator and then the pre-contest simulator. Essentially, we're just trying to create in the contest generator. We're trying to replicate what the field is going to look like. And then you go to the pre-contest simulator. And of course, you can adjust that based on how big the field is and the contest you're in and all of that stuff. And you can make your own adjustments too. You can upload your own projections, ownership, all of that. Once you get to the pre-contest simulator, you're simulating these contests tens of thousands of times. And then that's where you see like win percentage. That's the percent of time this lineup would have won in those tens of thousands of sims. The amount of times it was top 10, the amount of times it cashed, the amount of times it was duped, all of that stuff. And then you see on the left side, simulated ROI. That is what the ROI would have been across all of these sims runs. Anything else I'm missing here, Greg, before we actually dive into these lineups, just so everyone has a good idea of what we're talking about?
No, I think you covered it pretty well there. People, I'm sure, are going to notice the amount of heavy stacks, and that's kind of just inevitable on a 2-game slate, because if you're not going to be playing a lot of your quarterbacks and offensive players against the opposing defenses, well, then your lineups are just kind of left with limited options. So it totally makes sense to me if people are looking like, why are they lineup stacked like +3s and +4s, triple and quad stacks? That's going to happen naturally on 2-game slates. It's not an issue.
BD said, simple. Get the lineup generator and win money, then get the sims and retire from your job. That's the plan. It's working slowly, but working. If it were that easy, that'd be awesome. But yes, man, it's a nice unsolicited endorsement of the tools. They're very cool. And links to all of these in the description and in chat. I will say, so the lineup generator is down there, but right now with the Sims tool, Greg, we have a little bit of a deal going on, not the standard deal. This is the type of deal where we know that there isn't as much NFL happening anymore, but you still have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this week, right? With a lot of big showdown slates, multiple Millie Maker contests. Next week, you're going to have 2 games or 2 slates. You're also going to have the showdowns. You'll have 2 more games plus showdowns the next game, and then the Super Bowl. So if you're not a Sims user yet, you still wanted to try it. Still a ton of huge football contests out there. It's $99 for the Sims, right? $99 for the Sims, but also, Greg, free couple weeks of PGA as well. Now that we've launched the PGA simulator, so figure give everybody something so they're not going into this taking half off NFL, but also saying, hey, PGA, brand new PGA lineup simulator. We're going to give you a little taste of that as well.
Yeah, and if people are curious how to use it, I made a video. It's up on the YouTube channel in the same way if you guys have watched the how-to videos that I've made for the NFL Sims or for the NBA Sims, did the exact same thing with PGA, walk through everything, how it works, the contest generator, the simulation tool, post-contest simulation also. So I went through all that for PGA. So if you guys don't play very much PGA, but you're getting it for free with the NFL package, or if you are somebody who's trying out PGA for the first time, just want more information or anything along the lines where you want to know how it works, there's a video up on the YouTube channel of how to use all of our new tools on the site and how to make some money at PGA DFS.
Yeah, man. So link in the description in chat as well if you want to check it out. $99 for the entirety of the NFL postseason plus PGA Sims for what? Is it how long is it we get the PGA Sims for?
Through January 21st. So the PGA Sims not only cover the main slates, but also the showdowns for rounds 2 through 4. So if you guys are already on an NFL Sims package, you're going to get access to it for free. If you sign up, you also get access to it for free. It's anybody who's on the NFL Sims Max package that's currently been discounted for the rest of the NFL playoffs. And so you're going to be able to get, if you sign up now, for the Thursday main slate for NFL, as well as all these subsequent showdown slates for the rest of the tournament, both for this weekend's tournament and then next weekend's as well.
All right. So if we're taking a look at some of these top lineups, Mahomes, Pacheco, Singletary, Rice, Brown, Elijah Moore, Njoku, Travis Kelce, Chiefs. It's amazing to see how closely priced Njoku and Kelce are, how the mighty have fallen. Mahomes, Pacheco, Singletary, Rashi Rice, Brown, Elijah Moore, and Njoku, Kelsey, Texans. Hold on a second. Is that the same lineup, just two different defenses?
It looks like it
I
is.
don't think I've ever seen that. Since we started doing the show, Greg, I'm serious. I don't think I've ever seen that with the 1 and 2s being separated by just the defense. We've done this show. What is this? The 19th time we've done this show now. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, but it kind of goes to show how strong we're projecting that individual lineup to where it would show up the same way here, basically twice, just different defenses being filtered out. I mean, there are only so many lineup combinations you can make on a 2-game slate as well.
For sure. But you and I have actually done this several times for these small, like abbreviated slates. So,
yeah, that is true.
Interesting. Yeah, but you're right. You're not going to get this on a 13-game slate. Flacco, Singletary, Ford, Hill, Cooper, Moore, Njoku, Schultz, and Chiefs. And look, there's no surprise here that you're going to see as many QB +3, QB +4 spots as we are. It's not like it's just one of these games, one of these slates where it's only 2 games. It's only 4 teams. And if you're not getting a lot of Tua Tagovailoa, if you're not getting a lot of CJ Stroud, ultimately, when you get to some of these Patrick Mahomes and Flacco stacks, particularly with how affordable some of these skill players are, you're going to get the QB +3s. You're going to get the QB +4s. Do you have anything against that this week with the QB4 spots?
Absolutely not. It's definitely something that I'd be hesitant on, like an 8 or a 9-game slate or something. But for a 2-game slate, a couple of things here. When you just don't have that much pricing value and you're trying to create as much upside as possible, the easiest way to do it is with correlation, because or else you're just hoping that you get all of the touchdowns correct. So I do think that heavily stacking makes a whole bunch of sense. And then in addition to that, other than just the upside angle, that is a lineup construction the field generally tends to not make. So you're also putting yourself on certain kinds of lineups that the field isn't doing. So it also makes it a little bit easier to differentiate yourself.
A lot easier. And that's the thing. Even it may not seem this way, but there still aren't going to be that many people that go QB +4. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Would you say QB +4 on a slate like this is the equivalent to QB +3 on bigger slates?
So on bigger slates, I don't really have too much of an issue with QB +3 either.
I just mean how often the field gets to it, because it's not the most common build.
Yeah, so I don't know what it is for 2-game slates. I do know the field makes triple stacks something like 2% of the time for main slates, so very, very low percentage. But while there's only 2% of the field that is playing triple stacks, they make up something like 5% of the top 1% lineups. So it goes to show how that in the top producing lineups, the triple stacks are way more represented than what the field is actually playing them, which goes to show why it's actually a good lineup construction.
I want to see some of the other Joe Flacco lineups. So we have Flacco. We already talked about the first one. Flacco, Devon Achane, Singletary, Bell. Wow. Okay. Let me find that again. Cooper, Moore, Njoku, Tyreek Hill, and Dolphins. That's a crazy lineup. I mean, is that 0 Chiefs? Yeah. 0 Chiefs. By the way, I have no problem with Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane in the same lineup. I actually kind of love that. But how about that, man? You've got Dolphins defense too. So that lineup, not to say you're playing for this, like not to say that that's how it's constructed, but in a scenario like that, you'd be playing for the Chiefs to continue to not be good on offense, Greg, which is not that far-fetched. I mean, there may be some thought out there that they go into the postseason, they turn things around. What if they don't? Like, what if we talk all this weather, right? All these terrible, cold, frigid conditions in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium, and the Chiefs, who have lost multiple now games at home this year, some that they definitely should have. What if they just continue to not be good?
Hey, I've expected them to turn it around almost the entire season, and they just never have. So now it's at a point where if they don't do it this weekend, well, the season's over, and then we have to come to the conclusion of, oh, well, this team was just never really all that good, which is a very live possibility. It's actually probably the most likely outcome at this point, because I think there are a lot of signs that Travis Kelce is declining. People are tying it to like dumb narratives that are involving Taylor Swift. I don't think that's related at all. This is a tight end who's in his mid-30s that's had a lot of injuries and takes a lot of punishment. It's totally reasonable to think that Travis Kelce has taken a step back. And then you look at the wide receiver weapons this team has. Rashee Rice has stepped up more than a lot of us thought, but they're totally barren at the wide receiver position beyond him because Kadarius Toney's been terrible this year. They've attached themselves to MVS for the last couple of years. He's been terrible for forever. So it's not necessarily the fault of Patrick Mahomes, but he is a not great offensive line. He doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to. So you start to kind of think of it that way. It's how much can a quarterback do by himself without all that great of weapons around him? And I think that's really been the issue we've seen with the Chiefs so far.
And yeah, it absolutely has. It's just, it's something that you would continue to expect it to turn around. Same thing with the Eagles, right? They're not on either of these slates, but the Eagles are similarly constructed in the sense that, like, no, it's not guys getting older and this and that. It's just they can't figure it out right now. From an injury standpoint, though, Raheem Mostert is one of those guys where he may not seem to make a huge difference, but he's been very good this year. The guy, do you know Mostert on this season? And mind you, Greg, he's missed a couple games, 21 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's been ridiculous. And there's even been games that we've seen Mostert and Achane both have big games at the same time. Now, they do prefer to use Mostert once they get down to the goal line, which I think is totally reasonable because Achane himself has dealt with a lot of injuries this year, and they have a little bit more future stock invested in Achane than they do in Mostert. So, they don't want to totally burn out Achane in his first year. And then he also had I think it was the knee sprain that put him on the injured reserve for a little bit, and then he quickly got hurt when he first came back. So, yeah, I would expect that to continue in the playoffs if Mostert's able to stay healthy, that he is going to end up being the player with more touchdown equity in the red zone.
Let me ask you something from an opinion perspective outside of the Sims for a second, right? Would you feel better about the Dolphins as a whole if Jalen Waddle is back, even including Tyreek Hill? Because it certainly feels like, given the lack of kind of explosive options that they have in the passing game, once you get behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, the taking Waddle off the field has definitely made a sizable difference in the way that this team can operate, particularly in space, which is what they like to do.
Sure. And I mean, we saw it go both ways as well. I mean, this was obviously a little bit more apparent to us it was going to happen, but they struggled a whole bunch when Tyreek Hill was out as well. So yeah, it's absolutely in the Dolphins' best interest, and probably even for Tyreek Hill's fantasy production, to have Jalen Waddle out on the field so that there's somebody else to draw the attention of defenses, so that Tyreek Hill doesn't have to be double teamed on every single play.
All right, so let's take a look at some exposures. Then we'll go Sunday slate. Sunday's a little bit more interesting just because we have the 3 games. We already know what quarterback looks like. Can we go to stacks? Let's go to stacks for a second, though, before anything, to see how many of these are. So a ton of QB +3 or more stacks popping up. Totally
the majority.
Yeah.
The majority of our lineups, because if we look really closely here, there's about 20% of lineups are either QB +2 or QB +1, and hardly any of those are QB +1. So then the remaining 80% of lineups are going to be QB +3 or QB +4 stacks.
I don't think we include QB +4 in the QB +3 column here.
Correct.
So there's even more of that we don't know about. And I know some of that's coming in on Flacco.
Yeah, and we could also, if we went back to the lineups page and just filtered by Flacco, and then also by stack type of 4, we could see what some of those look like here. So we could see how many of them are in here. Like, look at how many of the lineups we have favorited that are QB +4 Cleveland stacks. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, I had a feeling that would be the case because we saw our exposure to Flacco was really high. At running back, Singletary, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Pacheco, Achane. What are we getting? Is there a good mix? See, not a lot of Miami running backs here. That's an interesting point. Now, Pacheco, I totally get. Singletary, sure, at home, 2-point spread in that game. Jerome Ford, 35%, 10% Kareem Hunt. Anything stand out to you here? Because nothing really jumps off the page. Yeah, we're over the field on a lot of these guys, particularly Pacheco and Singletary, and definitely under on Devon Achane right now. But nothing else stands out as something that I'd look to get away from.
Yeah, we're not getting much exposure to HN, not getting to any of Mostert, but also keep in mind the price points for these guys in the backfield. Mostert is $6,700. HN is $6,800. While there have been times this year that they've both had big games, this is a fairly difficult matchup that they're in against the Kansas City Chiefs. We've talked about how the weather isn't going to be optimal. At those kind of price tags, it is hard to get up to them relative to other guys. Like, we know Pacheco is the guy in the backfield. He's cheaper than both of them. We know that Devin Singletary has been the lead back for the Houston Texans over the course of the last probably like 10 weeks or something like that. And he is significantly less expensive than both Achane and Mostert. He's only $5,700. Jerome Ford is $5,500. So you've got these other guys who are not entirely the only running backs in the backfield, because we've got Kareem Hunt showing up in some lineups as well. So he takes some snaps as well as touches away from Jerome Ford. But I think we could feel better about Ford, Singletary, and Pacheco's workload than either of the Dolphins running backs. And these guys are all like $1,000 less expensive other than Pacheco.
But then then the only other question is, what if Raheem Mostert is out?
True. Like, then it changes everything.
And do we get to some Jeff Wilson?
What's the price point on Wilson? Wilson, he has to be close to the min, right?
He's 4,200. He's 200 off the min. Meanwhile, Kareem Hunt is 4,700.
Yeah, I think that would probably put him in that Kareem Hunt range, where right here we've got 16% expected ownership in the Sims tool here going to Kareem Hunt. We got to 10% exposure to him. We'd probably see something similar to Jeff Wilson, where he would be probably projected for like 15-ish% ownership, and he'd make it into somewhere around that as part of our lineups as well. Achane's exposure would go up a good amount as well. So Pacheco and Singletary would come down, but we're so starved for value on this slate that if you just get a couple of good plays out of Jeff Wilson Jr., you could see a scenario where he scores like 8-9 fantasy points is in a winning lineup.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you could also see, like, if that's the case, if you got a 9 from Wilson, it's entirely possible that Singletary doesn't score and finishes with, 10 or 11 or less, right? All of these guys, all of these guys, even Isaiah Pacheco in a game like that with that weather, could be super low scoring contest. All of them are live to not have huge games. So yeah, if Mostert was out, I think you'd have to consider Wilson. I would still prefer Hunt a little bit more, only because I know that some goal line work goes to Kareem Hunt, and that goes a touchdown at this position could go a really long way this week, a real long way. And We've seen Kareem Hunt get into the end zone like, how many times has he scored? Way more than people would expect. I think, he has 9 touchdowns on the season, which is more than most people would assume. Let's take a look at wide receivers and tight ends, then we can talk Sunday slate.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and we'll sort by the wide receivers here, and pretty much what you were expecting at the top of the show, Lofty, where you had said that you were expecting, and this was before we were just taking a shot in the dark. This was us looking at the pricing and not knowing what our data was going to give us. You had said you thought we'd be getting to a lot of Cleveland, and that really is the case, particularly at wide receiver. Amari Cooper showing up in 60% of lineups, so overweight to him. Elijah Moore in 47% of lineups, also overweight to him. Even David Bell as a punt option in 27% of lineups. So this is like 3 of our top 7 most exposed wide receivers are coming from Cleveland.
It's also not that difficult to make these lineups. I don't know if you guys have built any by yourself, or we're looking at the top of the show where we were talking about, looking at the highest simmed ROI lineups. It's really not that hard to build lineups that look good, because you've got Flacco at 6,100. Like, if you were to just take that Flacco lineup and then say, plug in the Chiefs defense, whatever, $2,900. And then you start getting to sub 6K Singletary, $6,400 Pacheco, Amari Cooper at 6,800. Ben and I built a lineup on the Wednesday show, and there's a million different variations that you could do with this that don't look bad at all. Greg, you could go now, a lineup like this, let me point out, would a balanced lineup looks really good. You just have to be okay with the fact that you're foregoing Tyreek Hill. Now, I'm not saying that is always the best decision here. It's not the case. But at the same time, you go with like the Rice, Cooper, Njoku, Pacheco, Singletary, Flacco. You can even double tap tight end with Kelsey and Njoku. And now you're getting a lineup that is super, super easy to create. I'm not saying it's the highest sim spot, but think about that. Let me just throw one at you here, okay? to get your thoughts. The reason why we're getting a decent amount of Bell, and I'm not seeing it. Oh yeah, Justin Watson. There you go. Okay. So Flacco, Pacheco, Singletary, Cooper, Rice, then Justin Watson or David Bell, Travis Kelce, David Njoku, Chiefs defense, or you could go up to any other defense. My point being, when you look at a lineup like that, the only difference there is that you're fading a expected to be 50% on Tyreek Hill, who can break a slate.
Yeah. And Tyreek Hill, what is his price tag relative to all the other players on the slate? He's
it's not even close.
Yeah, I was going to say there has to be a massive gap. He is $1,700 more expensive than
Nico.
I think than anybody on the slate.
Than Nico. Yeah, well, not including quarterbacks because Mahomes 7,100. But yes, any other skill player, he is $1,700 more expensive than.
Yeah, and even if we include quarterbacks, Mahomes is the next closest, and that's at $7,100, so $1,600 difference. He's way more expensive. He exists on a different tier than anybody else. If you have the allowed salary, you're not going to anybody other than Tyreek Hill at that point.
Exactly. Ryan asks, can we look at FD Sims as well? You know what? We have Jacob back with us?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So let's take a look at, we can run at FanDuel after we do Sunday DraftKings. We can take a look at FanDuel, throw it up on the screen there, Ryan. Appreciate you being with us for 16 months as a member here, by the way. All right. So that's what I'm saying though, Greg. Saturday to me is like to Tyreek Hill or to not Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. It's based on the data. I'm going to have to say that we want to be underweight to Tyreek Hill. If I was only playing one lineup, I would opt to not play Tyreek Hill on the Saturday slate. And it's for two reasons. First of all, he's very expensive. He's also very popular. And then you go look at what we're getting to in our data here, where he's projected for nearly 50% ownership. We're getting to him in a third of our lineup. So, relatively significantly underweight here at wide receiver. But then also for a lot of people, if you're posing the question of to Tyreek Hill or not to Tyreek Hill, I do think that probably applies to single entry for a lot of people. And we could reasonably expect this ownership on Tyreek Hill would be even higher in single entry, which means there's more leverage to be had by not playing him in a single entry lineup.
I just keep coming back to would you rather have so in this one lineup I just built, there's one punt. I have nobody above 6,800, but there's one punt, and that would be either like a Bell or a Watson, those guys, right? If you wanted to, you could go Dolphins defense, free up another 100. I suppose you could you can't get to any min-sal running backs. Not that you'd want to anyway. Would you rather have that type of build? And look, you can do both, obviously. But like you said, maybe we'll just talk about single entry here for a second. Or like with flatter payouts up top, maybe 10% to first. And you can account for that in the Sims as you see up top, percent to first. Where you can get two additional mid-range guys, or then Tyreek Hill over like a Rashee Rice or an Amari Cooper. But that means, the Njoku or the Kelce or the other Rice or Cooper ends up being another 3K guy or 4K guy.
This is going to be a good slate because you brought them both up there, like Njoku and Kelce. It's going to be a good slate to play double tight ends.
I think so. Take a look at tight end here. I would assume that we have a ton of Kelce and Njoku. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you do the addition on the ownership here, we got 120, so more than half of our lineups contain double tight ends. So two tight ends in more than half the lineups. Makes sense. We've talked about it a lot this year. When you have slates where there is not positional value at other spots, you get tight ends that are just not all that expensive. And also, Njoku's had some real upside this year. So, you got Travis Kelce at $6,100, Njoku at $5,600, Dalton Schultz at $4,400. Look at the comparable wide receivers in that same price range where it's not crazy at all to think Dalton Schultz would outscore like Elijah Moore at a similar price point.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's tough, but I think the tight end exposures there make a lot of sense. Not one where I'm really interested in punting. Actually, conversely, I'm more interested in double tapping tight ends, to be honest with you. All right. Anything else on Saturday you want to look at before we move on to Sunday?
Nope. Let's go ahead and look at the Sunday now. So, Jacob, I can pass it off to you. And look at that. Seamless.
All right. That was seamless. Before we do, though, guys, just so you know, Prize Picks. Do they have any free squares? They've seemed to have a lot of free squares lately. Do you have any free squares on Prize Picks right now?
Let's see. I don't think there's any free squares right now, but I could double check to see if that has
I feel like they
here.
frequently do them.
They do. They also have a lot of discounted squares. So even if there are ones sometimes that aren't like the over 0.5, there are ones that are like, 50% off and things along those lines.
Yeah. Anyway, it's still $100 first match deposit bonus if you guys haven't signed up there yet. 100% up to $100, meaning if you put $100 in, you now have 200. If you're already on other spots, they're not giving you this anymore. Prize Picks, if you're not there yet, you'll get that bonus and you'll immediately double your bankroll. Even if you only have 20, now you have 40. If you have 50, now you have 100. You get the point, all the way up to $100, matching that. More so though, Greg, not only do you have a format where if you hit 6 picks out of 6, you're 25xing, or if you hit 5x or 5 of 5, you're 10xing, or unlike traditional parlays, if you hit 4 or 5, you're still 2xing and doubling up. Whereas on other books, they're just never going to offer that to you. Plus, this is available in non-legal sports betting states where many of you guys can't get access to the phenomenal deal I'm about to tell you about. But you get a free month of all of our tools over at OddsShopper as well. That's kind of the kicker, right? If you're getting a free month of everything at OddsShopper when you sign up with the link in the description for Prize Picks.
Yeah, and the big thing too, because a lot of people think of OddsShopper and they just think of sports betting. We have everything over there. So it's not just that you're going to get the best available projected lines for us at DraftKings, at FanDuel, at your traditional sports books, but we've also got projections in there for Prize Picks, for Sleeper, for Underdog. So if you sign up at Prize Picks and you use our link, you're going to be getting access to all of that. So you're getting the deposit bonus, but you're also getting the tools that are going to allow you to be profitable after you sign up at Prize Picks and you take advantage of that deposit bonus. And then you also get into our Discord channel where we answer your questions and we post some additional bets in there for sports books as well as the pick'em sites like Prize Picks.
So check it out. Yeah, if you're not there yet. And guys, if you are in legal betting states, last one, I promise, but you'll appreciate this. See, I don't mind doing these things because I know they actually benefit you guys. BetMGM right now is one of the few books that's doing big promos. Bet 5, get 158 in bonus bets. Why they did that, I don't know. I had to ask our partnerships guy. He's like, oh, it's because of Super Bowl 58. Like, oh, you could have fooled me. Now, granted, betting 5 and getting $58 in bonus bet, 158 is much better. So them attaching the 1 to the front of that, that's significant. Don't get me wrong. But I was like, where's this 158 come from? Well, apparently it was from Super Bowl. But if you are in a legal betting state, you can't sign up at Prize Picks. I see it all the time. BetMGM, you deposit, takes a minute to sign up. You bet $5, you get $158 in bonus bets, regardless of whether your bet wins or loses. We get that question all the time. Doesn't matter. If you place a 12-leg same game parlay and you win, and it's $5, not only do you collect your winnings off of that, you also get $158 in bonus bets. If you place a 12-game same leg parlay and you lose, you still get $158 in bonus bets. So it's pretty sweet. So worst case scenario at the end of all of this, say you lose your initial stake, you lose your 158 in bonus bets, you go on the worst run of your life. I hope it doesn't happen for your sake. At the end of the day, you're down $5. Or you just build this up into a big ass bankroll and now you go, oh man, I put $5 in and now I'm in the north of 1,000. So check it out. Link in the description for BetMGM if you're in one of those states. They won't do this long. They never do, but it's there for now. All right, let's take a look at Sunday, Greg.
Let's do it.
Let's take a look at Sunday, 3-game slate. I'm a little bit more intrigued by this one because you've got the Bills game at home against the Steelers. That actually moved through 10. It's at 9.5 now. Not only do you have that game, but you have a couple of other spots where just big totals. Detroit and Rams, that total's sitting north of 50, right? That's at what, 51.5. And then Green Bay and Dallas is at 50.5. So you go from 2 games on Saturday where one of them is being played in Antarctica to 2 games in domes with 50+ point totals. And then the Bills Steelers sits at 34.5.
Yeah, of all the games that we have this weekend, pretty clearly the least appealing one that we have on paper on one side, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who it is crazy that this team ended up having a winning record and making the playoffs this year.
But they figured it out.
They
figured it out. Somehow, some way, man. They did it, and they're in. Not for long. But you know what? You know what? With the way that Josh Allen turns the ball over, I wouldn't be surprised for this game to stay closer than we would originally expect it to. Let's take a look at some lineups. I'm going to go full screen here and see what we get. Okay, so a nice spread.
Other than the Steelers, which I'm also good with. I'm also
yeah. I just think I'm praying to God that the Sims isn't like, man, that's a good leverage spot in the Steelers this week. I hope not.
Last Saturday, I think I ended up playing good amounts. Steelers actually didn't go that poorly for the Saturday slate, but for this weekend Sunday slate, I have no interest in going to the Steelers. We've got Buffalo, we've got Dallas, we got the Rams, we got the Lions. These are some potent passing games, and that's what's primarily showing up in our stacks here.
Yeah, and allow me to point out for those of you who have astutely noticed this already, no worries. But let me just say, the implied team totals for the Sunday slate, Dallas is around 29. Detroit is north of 27. The Rams are at 24.5. Okay. Bills are at 23. The Steelers, Greg, are at 12.75.
Seems high.
Yeah, it does. So that's one of the reasons you're not going to see a lot of that. But look, I'm looking at the top, what is this, 9 or 10 lineups in there. I see Allen, another Allen. I see 1, 2, 3 Dak Prescotts, a Matthew Stafford or 2, a couple Jared Goffs in there as well. Let's go straight to quarterback exposures. Let's see what our stack exposures look like. Wait a second. Okay, so we got no QB +1.
None.
This means we must have a lot of QB +4.
Yeah, we're going to have a handful of QB +4s in there because we've got, what is this, like 15% QB +3s, and then somewhere around 50% of those. So yeah, we've got like a third of our lineups are going to be QB +4 lineups.
Let's take a look at actual quarterback exposures then to see where we're at. It looks like Josh Allen's not going to have as much as I thought.
Could be. And you are correct. Yeah. Hardly any of him here. Relatively.
Yeah.
Not crazy underweight to the field though. Like 7% to 11%.
I mean, it kind of makes sense though. You've got the 3 guys up top. Even if you include Jordan Love as your 4th highest exposed quarterback, all in the games with massive totals. I know TJ Watt is out for Pittsburgh, and that makes a difference. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I'm not shocked by that. Can we, just to move around, unless you have anything else in this, Greg, I wouldn't mind moving around and seeing what individual exposures look like to some of these Buffalo guys and other players. Like, are we getting a lot of James Cook then?
Yeah, let's see. A little bit overweight to the field. It's well, most of the team were kind of even with, other than the pay up guys. We're underweight here to Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, which I assume is just due to pricing. And then everybody else, Kincaid, the defense, Shakir, James Cook, we're right about dead even with the field. So we had a question too from David. Is this taking into account that Gabe Davis is not playing? We can, what's that? We can see. I know they ruled him out, this morning? Yeah. So it's going to depend on, I'll pull up our projections here to see if we took him out or not yet. It's a very relevant question, obviously. And let's see. Did we have him in or not? I'm going to check out our projections page while we talk through this. I would still think that it would get. I'm not convinced that it would get us to more Josh Allen. I think it would get us to more Khalil Shakir. Yeah, so we do still have Gabe Davis in our projections, but we didn't have him projected to play very many snaps or be super involved. I mean, we had Gabe Davis project for 5.8 fantasy points. So you start to figure out, like, all right, where are some of those targets and routes going to be allocated to? And I tend to think you're right. I think it would primarily be to Shakur. And we are a little bit overweight to him as is. 17% projected ownership, getting to him in 21% of lineups. It doesn't totally change the outlook of the slate or anything, but we can maybe say that becomes like 20, like 26 to 28% Shakur or something.
It is funny too, because from an injury perspective, there's a few notable ones this week. Christian Watson, does he get back? That's another one. What happens in a 50+ total game with Green Bay in the event that a lot of those receivers, are either all back or not back? So let's see what we have right now. Aaron Jones, 50. I get that, by the way. Totally makes sense to me. Where's AJ Dillon? Hold on. Let me see AJ Dillon.
Yeah. So AJ Dillon.
He's still not practicing. So
yeah.
If he doesn't play, Aaron Jones is in line for a massive workload.
So, by the way, we are projecting AJ Dillon out. So we do not have AJ Dillon in our projections right now. We've gone ahead and are under the assumption that he will not play. So this Aaron Jones ownership, both projected and the exposure in our lineups, is under the assumption that AJ Dillon will not be playing.
I would also assume that we're projecting Laporta out. And I would think
we do have probably.
What's that?
Laporta is projected out for us.
And I would assume that we are projecting the Green Bay receivers in.
Let's see. It
looks... Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson.
Yeah, I'm just searching. We've got Watson projected in as well as Doubs. So, yes, you are correct.
Okay. So now we have a better idea. Appreciate you actually pointing that out, David. Pointing something helpful out for a change other than telling me I'm late each morning.
Nothing but facts. Nothing but facts. From
yeah. Right. Go to running backs for a second. So we're probably getting. Hold on. Don't do it yet, Jacob. Don't do it yet. So let me take some guesses just based on a little bit of what we've seen, Greg. I'm going to say, God, because we have Kyron Williams, Cook, Gibbs, Jones, Montgomery, Tony Pollard is a 7-point favorite. Shit, that gets tough. I mean, I don't think we'll have much Najee Harris or Warren. They're not cheap enough. Do you have any guesses? Because I haven't seen anything on Williams. I haven't looked at his exposure. I haven't looked at Gibbs. I saw we had 27% Cook and 50% Jones. So that gives us a little insight, but we haven't seen Pollard either.
Yeah, my guess is going to be just based on pricing, because I do know what the pricing is, that Aaron Jones at $6,300 and Tony Pollard at $61 are both going to be guys who are, like, we already saw the Aaron Jones ownership. I think Pollard could come in even higher than Aaron Jones just based on the amount of Cowboy stacks we had, just knowing how our data works and how the Sims function. I'm going to guess, an educated guess, that Tony Pollard is our most rostered running back.
Well, nothing feels worse than that. All right, let's see it. That is correct.
Not crazy. I was actually thinking it was going to be a little bit higher. I thought that we were going to be seeing like 70% of Pollard and then 20% Kyron Williams or something like that. So it's not quite as crazy as I was thinking it could possibly be. And Tony Pollard also, I mean, he's projected for nearly 50% ownership himself. So it's not like this is a insane stand on Tony Pollard or anything like that. And then even Kyron Williams, we actually are overweight to him as well, because he's only projected for 28% ownership.
Yeah, I actually don't mind this whatsoever. Look, if AJ Dillon doesn't play, and we don't assume he will, he's still not practicing, the Aaron Jones price point is going to create a lot of incentive to get there. You mentioned Tony Pollard at his price point as well. Aside from that, Kyron Williams is $700 more expensive than the next closest running back, but he's going to be on the field for 100% of snaps. So I'm happy to be a little bit over the field there. The one thing I'm noticing, though, is, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, we're kind of matching the field, or very close to matching the field, on almost everybody.
Yeah, underweight to the Pittsburgh running backs, which I really like, because fuck those guys. I'm tired of trying to figure out which Steelers running back is going to be on any given slate. So if it tells me that we're going to be underweight to the field slightly on Jaylen Warren and about half the field on Najee Harris, I'm good with that, especially because this game script is not favorable to the Steelers running game whatsoever. I mean, they're big underdogs. They've got a team implied total, like you had mentioned, of less than 2 touchdowns, 12.75. That is the implied team total we're looking at for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That does not set up well for the running backs in this spot. So hopefully this is the last time of the year that I could potentially get screwed by the Steelers running backs. By not playing them, I'm hoping I'm on the right side for the first time.
Yeah, I wanted to see. Hold on a second. Let me pull something up. I'm just going to Odd Shopper to see what Najee Harris's props are this week.
Yeah.
So his rushing yards prop is 57.5.
It's actually higher than I thought it would be.
Me too. 57.5 for Najee Harris. By the way, the under is plus money, Greg. It's kind of interesting.
Is the over like minus 140 or something? Minus 130?
I'll tell you right now. So the over, and by the way, this is, the best book. So like on Odd Shopper gives you the best bets, the best lines for each. So here's one. Actually, ESPN bet has 58.5. The over is minus 110. Okay, so Pinnacle's 57.5 with the over juiced to minus 128. FanDuel or DraftKings minus 135. So yeah, that exists.
I'm gonna pretend it doesn't though.
Yeah, I hear you. Put me in the game, Coach Chris said. Don't be surprised they pull this off against Buffalo. Nothing would surprise me, man. Nothing would surprise me.
It's the playoffs. We see a lot of random stuff happen. And Josh Allen also has had some absolute duds of games. I know that ultimately they ended up winning last week against the Miami Dolphins, but it got really dicey at times in the first half where we saw the Bills march down the field and Josh Allen just throws a terrible interception. I think that was in the first quarter in the end zone. It looked like they were about to score. He threw another one. It was on a 4th down, so it wasn't all that consequential, but it was still a poor decision. He turns the ball over a shit ton this year, and that could create any sort of situation where the Bills could lose at any time because of his turnover issues.
Look, I bet the Steelers at plus 10 earlier in the week. I put it on my picks for every game video, so it's on the record. If it doesn't hit, well, but it was a 34 point total, 10-point spread. That's a gigantic spread for a 34 total game. So we'll see. I mean, really, it's not a great game for fantasy purposes. TJ Watt being out makes a difference without question, but we'll see how it plays out. You want to take a look at wide receivers?
Let's do it.
All right, wait, don't do it. Don't do it. All right. So if you had to guess, do you already know?
Yeah, I just saw it.
All right. That's okay. Let's go wide receivers here. Wow.
Demarcus Robinson. Welcome to our lineups.
So this makes sense to me, and I'll tell you why. I bet if you go to Matthew Stafford, I bet if you went to lineups filtered by Stafford and QB +4, I bet you there's a lot of Matthew Stafford QB +4.
Pretty good chance of that. And there's another, I want to see if we go back, because there was somebody I didn't see on our exposure. There's 2 cheap wide receivers that I like this weekend. One of them is Demarcus Robinson. The other one, though, is Jameson Williams, who, let's see, is he showing up in lineups? Oh, we are getting to a good amount of Williams as well, 39%. The other point I was going to bring up is that if we're getting to a lot of Demarcus Robinson and not much of Williams, that I'd be looking at doing an ROI boost to Williams and maybe downgrading Robinson a little bit. But we've got nearly 40% of Jameson Williams. I think that he's a very high upside, low dollar play for this slate, because we've seen the line's been more apt to work him into game plans in the second half of the year. He's very boom or bust, but he is massive big play upside. It would not at all be surprising to see him break off a 50-yard touchdown or anything like that. So I like the overweight to Jameson Williams as well as a salary saving option. I like it too, but then the natural question after that becomes, what do you make of the fact that we're getting 39% Jameson Williams and 11% Josh Reynolds? Josh Reynolds
Like Jamison Williams will definitely benefit from Sam Laporta's absence. Any of these guys will, unless you're like, oh no, this is a James Mitchell day or whatever at the tight end position. You have to assume for the most part that Jamison Williams benefits, and Josh Reynolds, who's already on the field a ton but played 88% of snaps last week. What the hell was Dan Campbell doing? He's going to benefit too, just from more opportunities. He's 3,800. Jamison Williams on DraftKings is 3,500. So there's only a $300 gap in salary there. What is ownership? 14% right now. Our pool ownership in this on Reynolds, and 26 to Jamison Williams.
So I think there's a case to be made that we could do an ROI boost up to get more Josh Reynolds, which would lower our exposure a little bit to Demarcus Robinson and Jamison Williams. However, I view Josh Reynolds as being like the safest option of kind of these low cost guys, but he doesn't have quite the same ceiling. And what I really like about Jamison Williams is that he has that big play touchdown sort of upside that Josh Reynolds doesn't have in the same sort of way. I think Josh Reynolds is a safer bet for targets. He's a safer bet for receptions, but I don't view the ceiling quite the same.
I don't either. But he's kind of been one of those tried and true guys that when somebody's out, he is very active. That's all. I don't know. A lot of CeeDee Lamb, a lot of St. Brown, a lot of Nakua. Man, a lot more Nakua than Cooper Kupp. Jamison Williams, Shakir. That Shakir ownership, that exposure to Shakir could absolutely come up in the event that, or not in the event, but when we get Gabe Davis out of these projections.
By the way, our ceiling projection on Jamison Williams, I just checked it really quick in the Boom Bust tool. It is about 2.5 fantasy points higher than Josh Reynolds, which is a sizable gap.
Can we look at tight ends, Jacob, and see if we are getting any Brock Wright or Mitchell? Okay.
Little Brock Wright, 16.7%.
We know that Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson used the tight ends in the red zone. We saw Sam Laporta with 10 touchdowns as a rookie. Not all of them in the red zone, but hell of a lot of them. We saw last year, if you guys can go back and look, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I remember distinctly the reason I liked Sam Laporta so much coming into this year was I remember looking at the numbers and looking at red zone targets and even goal line targets last year and touchdown scores at the tight end position. And there were like 3 different tight ends that the Lions would rotate in to get opportunities in the end zone, and a bunch of different touchdowns scattered about at the position. So it's not crazy to me to think that Brock Wright could get there. Also, one other point to make, Greg, is that unlike the Saturday 2-game slate, where you have Kelsey at the cheapest he's been in how long? 5 years or more. And you have Njoku, who is just completely broken out with Joe Flacco. Also Dalton Schultz. You don't really have that here because Luke Musgrave is back. So that takes some away from Tucker Kraft. Higbee's just a guy, but you'll see him in a lot of Stafford stacks. Kincaid is there, but Dawson Knox isn't exactly disappearing. Like, it's Jake Ferguson, who's a strong play, but it's Jake Ferguson kind of, and then everybody else.
Yep, which is also why if you look at our tight end exposure, where it was something like 2/3 of our lineups for the Saturday slate were double tight end lineups, whereas looking at our exposures of tight ends here, it's only about 1 out of 5 lineups for the Sunday slate here that we have double tight end lineups, which really goes to show to what you mentioned there. The tight ends are just not nearly as strong of options here on this Sunday. They're generally just guys who it might not even the position is so weak on Sunday, it might not even matter. It might just be who's the cheapest guy that doesn't totally dud. Like, it could be a slate like week 1 of this NFL season. The Millie Maker on FanDuel was one with Isaiah Likely, who scored 1.7 fantasy points or something like that. That could be the Sunday slate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It could be that none of these guys get north of 10 fantasy points.
Probably the most likely. I'm not going to say
Ferguson's
the most likely
pretty
scenario.
solid, though.
Yeah, we do have Ferguson projected for 12, but I think the most likely scenario is that none of the tight ends have great games.
Yeah, and if that's the case, maybe Brock Wright's not all that crazy, right?
For sure not. This could be a spot where Brock Wright is priced at $3K flat and maybe is like 2 catches for 25 yards and some of the high-end wide receivers go off. And then it's just like, oh, cool. We've got, Brock Wright with 4 fantasy points in a winning lineup.
Last thing I want to look at, go to lineups one more time, Jacob, because as you mentioned, you pointed out, Greg, we're not getting a lot of those double tight ends. So let's see what these lineups look like. So the top Sim ROI lineup, Allen, Jones, Cook, St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Khalil Shakir. That's a great looking lineup. I mean, look at that. You're getting, so now just to point this out, there is no Stephon Diggs in that Josh Allen stack, but hell, that's worked plenty lately not having him. Jones, Cook, and Kyron Williams with Amon-Ra St. Brown. That is a really nice looking lineup. Just being able, because I haven't hand built any lineups for Sunday, being able to see what you can do here, pretty eye opening. Look at some of these lineups, even the one beneath it with the Dak Prescott +4. There's a lot you can do here that looks pretty good.
Yeah, and then also when we were looking at the tight end exposures, and it was about 1 out of 5 lineups were double tight ends. We're seeing that here. We've got about 10 lineups on screen. 2 of them have tight ends in the flex spot. It's mostly some of the running backs or some of the cheap wide receivers like Demarcus Robinson in the flex in one of those lineups. I see another one with Jamison Williams, another one with Jamison Williams. So yeah, I like how these lineups are looking quite a bit as well.
Yeah, man. All right. Did you want to pull up for Ryan the FanDuel Sims for Saturday?
I've got this right here on my screen. So I'll pull this up here. And there we go. So this is FanDuel for Saturday, just so everybody is aware of what we're looking at. So on FanDuel, even though it's only a 2-game slate, one thing you guys could expect that I've noticed all year from building lineups on both FanDuel and DraftKings, you're not going to get as aggressive of stacking on FanDuel because of the lack of the PPR bonus. So even on a 2-game slate, you're not going to see very many of the QB +4, if any of those lineups, because it is hard for those to project quite as well with the same upside. And the way our simulations work is a play-by-play simulation. So each play is being simulated out over the course of each game, and we're doing that 40,000 times. And the wide receivers, it's just hard for all of them to get there at the same time when they're only getting 0.5 point for a catch as opposed to 1 full point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of Mahomes. It's a lot of Mahomes. It's scary. It never feels good, but it's a 2-game slate. I just want to see something. Let me pull FanDuel up here just to see the price differences. Did FanDuel do a better job of pricing these quarterbacks?
So over on FanDuel, the quarterbacks are going to be a little bit more expensive relatively. We have Patrick Mahomes is priced at $8,000. Tua is
wow, look at Flacco though.
See, Flacco. Yeah, Flacco is $7,800.
And he should be, dude. That's what I'm saying. He should be.
Kind of. He's only $200 less than Patrick Mahomes. That to me does seem a little silly. And then he's $800 more than Tua. I mean, considering the weather and everything, I understand how that plays into how that comes into play. But I do think $7,800 is a little aggressive for Joe Flacco.
But here's what I'm saying, man. Okay, so Flacco's $8K, right, on FanDuel, and Mahomes is $8K. Flacco is $7,800. If Flacco was $7K, he is going to be as chalky as it possibly gets. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have to price these guys. Do you have ownership right now do you have ownership for FanDuel? I can pull it up if you don't have it.
So we do have the lineup the contest generated in the Sims is probably about as equal of predictor of ownership as our regular ownership projections anyway. So we can look at both of them here. I just have it up in the contest generator, not our actual ownership projections.
All right. So I pulled it up in our ownership projections for FanDuel. And let me sort by position here. Mahomes 32. Flacco's still the second highest projected owned quarterback on the slate at 23%.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what we're seeing here as well. Second most popular quarterback. There's definite tiers to this. We got Mahomes, tier of his own in terms of ownership. Then there's Joe Flacco, and then CJ Stroud and Tua kind of close together at just under 20%. We have seen CJ Stroud, though, will often end up being a little bit more popular in his projected ownership. People just like clicking the CJ Stroud button. So I do anticipate that he's probably going to be a little bit more popular than this. And then in turn, maybe Mahomes lose a couple of points off his projected ownership. Same with Tua. But yeah, I do think this paints a pretty clear picture in terms of what we're looking at on FanDuel, even in terms of our exposures we want to get to. It's Mahomes. If you're playing one lineup, he's the guy to get to, followed by Joe Flacco. And then CJ Stroud and Tua are, afterthoughts a little bit, at least in our data, if you guys are building just one lineup.
To your point earlier, I think you could argue maybe Flacco's a little bit overpriced relative to Mahomes on FanDuel, but he's definitely underpriced on DraftKings.
For sure. No doubt about it.
And that is going to do a lot. Last thing we'll do before we get out of here, just for Ryan and anyone else that was curious on FanDuel, let's just look at running backs and wide receivers tight end. We can cruise through this. A lot of Singletary. Okay. Where is he priced at?
Yeah, so we've got basically only exposure to 3 running backs: Singletary, Pacheco, Ford, Kareem Hunt not showing up in lineups, Achane not showing up in lineups. We got one CEH lineup in here, but that's nothing all that significant. You're going to be playing Singletary, Pacheco, Jerome Ford, and I think you feel pretty good about that for the Saturday FanDuel slate.
Yeah, and Mostert's 8,200 too if he plays. So that
tough.
Makes things very difficult if him and Achane are both in. And at wide receiver, Hill's 9,400, Collins is 8,300. Then you've got Rice at 78, Cooper at 75. Falls off a cliff after that.
And as far as our exposures go, we've got Amari Cooper showing up in half of lineups. A lot of this is fairly close to the field, other than Noah Brown. This is very interesting, Luffy. Noah Brown is only projected for 14% ownership on the Saturday slate on FanDuel. We are way overweight to him. He is in 40% of our lineups. And then in turn, we're well underweight to Tyreek Hill on FanDuel. He's expected to be super popular. We're coming in well underweight to him. I mean, we've seen massive big play upside for Noah Brown. I'm kind of surprised that the field is not getting to him really at all. Only 14% projected ownership to Noah Brown. I like that as being a spot to be overweight to.
Yeah, it's also tough to gauge this early too, because, well, I say this early, but it's not early. It's Saturday. Tank Dell obviously is out, but Noah Brown and Robert Woods are both questionable. Limited practices on Thursday, and Brown didn't even practice at all on Wednesday. So I think it's a real possibility that one of these guys doesn't play this week.
Yeah, because it's the playoffs, I do tend to think that they are going to be out there, but I could be wrong. It's just the best guess, and we'll know more come tomorrow. And I will be doing a live before lock show tomorrow afternoon with Eric, and we'll get a better sense of who's in, who's out, and what the projections look like then.
Last thing, tight ends, and then we'll get out of here. Appreciate you guys hanging out. If you haven't done so, take a single second, hit that thumbs up. Goes a long way for us. We appreciate you.
Tight end exposures, and just like we saw over on DraftKings, we are getting to some double tight end lineups here on FanDuel because our tight end exposure is adding up to about 150% here. So Travis Kelce, David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, no real surprises. Those are the guys to get to, and we're overweight to all 3 of them. Well, how is that possible? Well, when you make double tight end lineups.
Same thing as DraftKings. I mean, that's actually a pretty similar build on FanDuel and DraftKings to what we're seeing, right? Although I think with DraftKings was like 70% Kelce, 55% Njoku, or flip the other way around, one of the two. But it's still a lot of Schultz, a lot of Njoku, a lot of Kelce. The one takeaway I have from this, just looking at FanDuel, looking at Saturday, looking at Sunday on DraftKings, the one takeaway is that the tight end position, believe it or not, is going to be the biggest differentiator, in my opinion, from the Saturday to the Sunday slate, depending on what builds look like.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of good football this weekend as well. So looking forward to it. And then also, like Lofty mentioned before, don't forget, guys, if you sign up for our NFL package now, the Sims Max, it's less than $100 for the rest of the year through the playoffs. And the next couple of weeks are going to be free PGA Sims coming with our NFL package.
Yeah, man. Link in the description and in chat. I always say, too, if you have questions, our DMs are open. Greg's and mine on Twitter. Happy to answer those. And Greg's got a ton of tutorials out. He actually just did one for the PGA tool. It's a very good one. Walk you through everything on how to use it. We have one for the NFL tool. So if you're new and you're going, man, I want to do it, but I don't know if I'm there yet. If I understand it all, we've tried to set up the framework. So when you go into it, you'll learn everything very quickly with all the tutorials, any questions you have. Any of that, we got you. Anyway, hey, you can follow Greg at G Ehrenberg DFS on Twitter, me at Laffy_D. Shout out to Jacob for producing this one. Live before lock tomorrow. Deeper dive live before lock on Sunday. Do we have deeper dive and live before lock on Sunday?
Sunday, yes.
Okay. So we got you covered top to bottom. We'll have it on Monday too for Eagles Bucks. I get to stay up late and watch the Eagles lose. I was thinking, just give me Sunday 1 p.m. game would have made my life so much easier. But it is what it is. We'll be here no matter what. Plenty of NFL content coming up, and of course NBA content throughout the day and tonight for live before lock. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you back here for the next one. Peace.
Later.